everybody. It's Erin, the owner of General Giraffe's Newborn Care and Family Services. Tonight I'm here with Brandon Johnson, the owner of Infertility Isn't Inferior. He is a fertility therapist. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Erin. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How are things out in the West Coast? Or not the West Coast, the Midwest. I'm sorry.
Cold.
Yes, it was cold yesterday and today.
Yes. Well, actually, today is 55, so I'm thankful.
Oh, good for you. It wasn't for us. I left the house and I was like, oh, it's bone chilling cold. Nice. So tell us a little bit about how you got into being a fertility therapist.
So I had my own infertility journey. I was diagnosed with azoospermia, and the process that brought me and my wife is just horrible. There was the anger. We weren't talking to each other. I lost myself. And overall, I needed help. And I tried seeking out therapists, and I just couldn't find one that I was really comfortable with. And then I realized there are just not many resources for men. So at that point, after trying to receive help and not having help to receive, I added infertility to my practice because I figured no one should go through this journey alone. It's just way too difficult.
I agree. I mean, I don't have, as far as I know, I don't have infertility issues because I've never really actively tried for children. But I do know it's a hard journey, and it must be really hard, especially from a male perspective, because at least up until, probably several years ago, most of it was always on the woman. It's the woman who has the fertility issues, and they never really thought about the man. So that must have been really, really hard for you.
It is. And I come from a very fertile family. So I just never thought that this would be an issue. It was like, okay, get married, go to college, get married, have children, and everything is great and complete in order.
Yeah.
And then you realize it, and it takes this blow to your ego. And it's like, at the very least you can do is you can have a child or impregnate somebody. And now I can't even do that. And I can't have the family I always wanted. And so personally, that's where it took me. And I just became depressed and not wanting to be and losing faith and not wanting to work, not wanting to get out of bed.
Oh my goodness.
That's
That
the
must have
person.
been so hard.
Yeah.
Because you seem like such like a great, fun guy that with a lot of personality and stuff too. So I couldn't imagine from going from that to somebody who, like you said, you didn't want to get out of bed. That's so tough.
That took some work to get back to. So after about a year or two, I started to get my smile back and accept it for what it is and realize that I still want a family. And that came understanding that I can still be a father even if the child isn't mine, along with a lot of grief and loss work. The grief and loss of my fertility.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of really sitting down, self-reflecting, using what I know about therapy on myself because I couldn't find the therapist that I really wanted to talk to.
Well, that's good that you did that hard, deep work, because that really that's a challenge. I mean, I know I've done some deep work with myself and it's a challenge, but most people, when they know what they do to do and give advice to other people, it's even harder for them to do it on themselves. So that takes a lot. Good for you.
Man, thank you, because it was tough. And the hardest part was keeping my marriage intact. Because, I mean, there were nights that we didn't talk, or we just stare off into each other, or I would just look at her and be upset, and we're just trying to figure it out. And the hardest part of it, well, actually, there are many hard points, but the hardest part is trying to figure out how to have this child. Be a donor, IUI, Do you not want to have a surgery? And it's just a lot of, it's a complicated journey.
I-
And
I'm sure.
and the saddest part of all is even though I couldn't have a child, it still fell back to the wife.
I'm so sorry.
So she's still the one that has to go through the IUI treatment, still get tested for all of the progesterone and make sure everything is okay. So even though it's a male issue in our case, it's still the fact that the women still have to go through it. There should be some more research done or more quality in the whole infertility journey.
Well, I agree. That's why when I saw you at the infertility summit and stuff, I was just amazed at the stuff that you talked about and how you're so open about it as well too, because it's a hard thing for a woman who really wants to have a child and they can't, but it's a little bit more accepted because we've heard it for years that it's usually the woman's issue and what have you. So it must be so much or it is so much harder when it comes down to it's finding out it's the male that's having the issues with it. Just like you said, just your ego took a huge undertaking with it too, and I love how you also said that it's not, even though it was your issue, your wife had to go through all this, so in the end it's really a whole family issue, and how we really should have other aspects of finding out, yes, if it's a male issue, should we really have the woman go through all of that stuff if we know that everything is fine on her side? I would agree, maybe not, but that's not my that's not my forte really. But I agree.
And I'm with you there. And part of me understands. I understand that the ovulation timing has to be right and the right amount of progesterone, but it's still invasive.
Yes.
Um, I thought it was invasive to have to give a sperm sample and you just hear everybody walking down the hallway. But that's nothing compared to what the woman actually go through and receiving what's that thing called? The scapula, is that is
Oh,
like
to be able to scrape the sides
where
and
they
stuff.
no, where they actually look inside and they kind of open up
Oh,
a little bit.
they're like pliers that kind of when they do a vaginal exam.
Yes.
Yeah, they're
And
they're
just
like,
seeing her go through that,
you have a heart of gold. Like, how compassionate you are, because here you are the one in your situation that was having that's infertile, but how much compassion you have for the women who still have to go through all of this. That must have been a lifesaver for you and your wife too, to go through it, even though you were having a hard time and it brought a lot of emotional pain between the two of you guys. But for you to still have that compassion for her is amazing.
yes, because the biggest thing I realized is though the problem is mine, infertility is still a couple's issue.
Mm,
It's probably the one thing that a couple has to experience on their. That's probably the one thing that a couple has that's individual that affects the entire couple.
yeah, yeah.
When you look at any other disease, it's still still the individual's battle, and the other person has to be there to support them.
Yeah.
With infertility, regardless of who has the diagnosis, it's a couple's concern.
Yeah, exactly. It is, because yeah, it takes two to tango, basically. So it's right. You're right. It's a couple's issue. Tell me some of the things that, besides your own fertility struggles and stuff, what other stuff do you bring into your therapy to be able to help couples get through all of this?
Well, I walk them through the grief and loss process. I help them get on one accord first, because if they're not together and they're not communicating, then nothing's going to work.
Mm,
And then we go through the steps, the anger, depression, all the way through acceptance. And after acceptance, then we go through family planning, And that's discussing whether they want children, adoption, IUI, IVF, the financial struggles, or if they even want to be childless, and really coming to a grip that even being childless is okay as long as you as a couple have come on one accord and made this decision and understand the decision that you make. Um, and so that's a brief synopsis of the steps that we walk through during therapy to really get the couple focused on their end goal and learn how to cope with the grief. And the reason I say cope instead of overcome is because you go through the struggle again when you want child number 2 or 3. So
Mm.
it's repetitive in nature.
So it's not something that once you get over it with one child, people are, so it's something that kind of comes back, some of the emotions that come back with it and stuff too, if they want to have a second and a third. I would never have thought that. That's so, I mean, it makes sense, but I would never have thought, I figured that once they've healed it once, they don't have to heal it again. But
Yeah, because once you plan for the second child, you have to go through the steps of how to have this child again.
true.
And do you even want to try a different method? So, and if you try like IVF, and IVF is draining. It's on average at least 20,000 a try in any given state.
Yep.
And hopefully you live in a state where insurance will cover some of that, but it's still expensive. Instead of IVF, do you want to try maybe IUI with a donor sperm, which will cost less, or adoption, which is still expensive,
Yep.
or embryo transfer? So you have to also factor in the financial factor all over again. And it's just dealing with everything from step one almost, except for now you can communicate better.
Well, yes, which is always a good thing. And at least you know your end goal, and you know you're not blinded by the fact that you didn't know what was going to happen the first time around. At least this time you know that. You're not getting the having to hear the results again that you can't have children this way, but you can do it another way, which is still really hard, even though they already knew, they already had that information beforehand. So what are some of the resources that are around that you give people when they come to you? Obviously, you help them with the therapy aspect of it, but I'm sure for your own experience and probably just researching and stuff, what are some of the other resources that are out there for them that you recommend to people?
Resolve is a big one. I really recommend Resolve and ASRM if they're really interested in the science part of it. The other thing is books. There's a book by T.J. Payton where she talks about the emotional struggle of being a wife who deals with male infertility.
Mm.
And that's a really good book for women who husbands are infertile. And for women, there are really a plethora of other books that deal with miscarriages and infertility.
Mm.
That variety is much more open.
Yeah. Yeah.
So definitely books and Resolve and getting in contact with the group.
What can you just tell us a little more about what or who Resolve is?
Well, Resolve is the National Infertility Association that really connects people to infertility resources, such as the groups, therapists, other treatment centers, doctors, acupuncture. Usually anyone who deals in the world of infertility, Resolve can typically connect them. What I love is Resolve New England. Resolve New England is killing it. I often follow them, even though I'm in the Midwest.
Well, just my understanding, and this goes back to just from being around children so much through my career. My understanding is that Massachusetts in general has the highest IVF treatments in the U.S. and maybe California might have the second highest or something, but or infertility treatments and what have you, which I know Resolve their chapter for New England is out of Massachusetts, which is actually relatively speaking right up the street from where I live, which is great. And it's awesome that I know about it now because now I can refer clients, or have the resource, what have you. So I would say that might have something a little bit to do with it. Plus, we're also very medical here, so we have a lot of research and a lot of stuff that goes on too for infertility. Am I wrong to say that, or is that true?
That can be true because every state will deal with it differently. Like you have certain states that have a higher population of people who seek therapists, and
Mm.
it just varies by state. Illinois, specifically Chicagoland area, is big in cancer research,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
every state has its specialty and what the population will seek more of. So that would really help, especially in Massachusetts, if they have the highest IVF per capita.
That's what I have been told. Like I said, I haven't actually researched it because I have not tried to have children, so I wouldn't know about that. I know how to stop from having children. Um, that I'm very aware of. But so yeah, so I mean, but Resolve is really great. They're the ones that just put on the infertility summit. They also have another summit coming out in March, I believe. And they do a lot of stuff, and they do a lot of stuff with what's the clinic that I actually have a friend of mine who sees who's the doctor now that was on the summit. I know his first name, but his last name is Dr. Andre something.
Oh, it starts with a B.
Yes, I can't remember it either, but I know a client who, I mean, not a client, I'm sorry, I have a friend of mine who sees him as well, too. So I know he's really big, obviously, in it, and he's one of the top people in their facility and stuff too. So I think it's just great that there's more and more information coming out of this. I think that the more that we talk about it for both sides and we normalize it, especially for men too. What are some of the things that men can, just specific resources for men? Because as you said, it really took a toll on you personally. You said you come from like a family of fertile people, and you just had this, thought process of going to college, getting married, having children, and that's usually what everybody thinks. And it can be really daunting for men too. So what do you recommend for them?
You know what? In honesty, I recommend therapy for men because men are too closed off to join a group until they begin the healing process, and then they're willing to join a group. And even if they are diagnosed, they'll still worry about their wife's feelings or their partner's feelings. For men, I really start off with therapy because there's minimal, there's not much support for men, honestly.
Sure.
The only other thing is to find a group, but even finding one that will focus on men and male infertility is rare. And I think the biggest cases may be in that New England area, just because there's so many resources between all the New England states.
Yeah.
And they're small enough to just travel fairly easily.
Yeah. Yeah. We're pretty close, our states.
Yeah, especially major city to major city.
Yeah.
And once you start coming west in the country, everything's further spread out. So you're really limited to what's in your state, unless you happen to be in a city that's on the border. But even then, there's not much for men.
That's really too bad, because the more and more studies come out, the more we're realizing that there's a higher number of infertility with men than it was with women too. So maybe the more we talk about it and the more we start to normalize it, the more the resources will come out too for them. But I do agree with you. Therapy, especially one-on-one therapy, starting out with them first, because they have a lot of emotions that they have to get through, a lot of wounds and things that they've got to peel off and finally get to a point where they feel comfortable being able to at least talk to somebody else who goes through the same thing as them. You know.
Yes, and it's fine. So when they finally get into therapy, that they can finally unload,
Yes.
um, and realize that they're not being judged, and realize these feelings are normal, and then they can start the healing process. Um, and the hard part about men is they try to do the work before coming to therapy, and getting them and like, I'm the reason that I'm going to help you get through this. Don't worry about it. I'll help you get through it. And we go from there. But they try to do all the work before seeing a therapist and then come to the therapist as if everything's okay.
Well, right, because they got to put up that facade that they're all good and they're okay when obviously they're coming to therapy because they need help with having to deal with something.
Yes.
True. So tell me, what are three? So you would recommend obviously men seeing therapists, but is there anything else? Do you recommend them possibly seeing an acupuncturist or, any of that kind of thing, or are there any supplements or anything that men can take?
I do recommend seeing an acupuncturist if you believe that it will work. Um, and even the supplements. Nothing is 100% guaranteed to work, but I do recommend incorporating a better lifestyle. So personally, when began my own journey, I was 360 pounds roughly.
Oh my goodness. You
Um,
definitely did some lifestyle changes.
yes. And I was doing it to help my fertility and overall lifestyle, just to be healthy for when I actually had a child. And so really change your lifestyle. It would never hurt to improve your lifestyle. So that's one thing I really recommend for men, whether it's exercising more, taking vitamins, making sure that you're going to the doctor every year to see if you're okay, make sure your levels are in the right order. Testosterone seems to be a big one that's dropping off for men earlier in age.
Hmm.
So I have not done the research to say how soon or why, but there are a few articles that discuss testosterone dropping in men earlier. And
Interesting.
if I can account it to anything, it's probably diet because the increase of sugar adds estrogen, which will naturally drop testosterone, which will affect infertility.
Yep. Yep. And everything is made with sugar. There's hidden sugar in so much.
Yeah,
Great. Awesome. So just tell me, like, briefly, really, like, three things that you would recommend a couple do, um, that are like 100, specific things that you recommend to your clients right off the bat. Obviously seeing a therapist because they're seeing you, but, um, other things.
so get on one accord, be open and honest with your feelings, and don't be afraid to take a break whenever this journey becomes too difficult.
Those are great. So you mentioned take a break, get on the same page, and do and open your emotional self to be able to help get through the journey.
Right.
Those are those are really valuable because those are things that are very overlooked. People end up wanting to think that something else outside the box would be more
Yeah.
helpful, but you're right. Like, you have to be on the same page with your partner. You have to be open to talk about your feelings with it, because wow, that's really powerful information.
And because infertility becomes so medical, you just forget about your own feelings. It becomes robotic in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, and especially for men, that can be that that can take a toll, right? I mean, it can for women too, but for men, I feel like when trying for a child becomes like robotic to them, it seems like they kind of push away a little bit, in my opinion.
They do, but the process, how do I say this? They're not in the process of the roboticness. They're indirectly involved because even during that time, the woman is measuring her temperature.
True.
Um, it's all the procedure still falls on a woman. Get up, take your temperature, check your check to see how you're ovulating, if the fluid, cervical
And
fluid
is yeah, sorry, yeah. Is
is
at the right temperature and the right all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So there's so much of it, and indirectly, you're like, as a man, you want to help, and you just really have to support.
Yeah. Great. So I'm excited to have you. You will be at our one of our panelists on my expo that I have coming up in a couple of weeks, December 6th. Tell people where they can find you, your social media and stuff like that too. You also do virtual stuff. I'm assuming most people do virtual stuff now, but
You can find me on Instagram at brandon.therapist. Make sure you follow me. And then email is bjohnson.i3cares@gmail.com. You can call me direct, 651-998-9335. And also go to my website, which is infertilityisn'tinferior.com.
great. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I definitely look forward to learning more about the journey and what you have to say coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to be a panelist. And thank you for tonight also.
Oh, you're welcome. Not a problem. You have a great night.
Thank you, you too, Aaron.
Bye.